My girlfriend hooked up with my best friend while we were on a break, then claimed, "We weren't together, so I can do whatever I want." You don't own me. Real women don't ask permission to explore their options. So I exposed them both and watched their lives fall apart. I never thought I'd be the guy posting here, but I genuinely need outside perspective because the situation spiraled so fast I'm still trying to process it. I'm 27, been with my girlfriend Karen, 25, for a little over 3 years. We live in the same apartment building, but not technically together. Same floor, different units. It made things convenient without feeling too locked in. Or at least that's what I thought. My best friend Thomas and I have known each other since freshman year of college. He's basically family. He's been at every major milestone in my life. Birthdays, job changes, hospital visits when my dad got sick. He was the one person I never questioned. About 2 months ago, Karen started getting distant. Not dramatic, just subtle. Shorter texts. Busy more often. Less interested in planning anything long-term. When I brought it up, she said she felt smothered and needed space to rediscover herself. Her exact phrasing. I didn't fight it. I suggested we take a short break. 2 weeks. No seeing other people. Just time to think and reset. She agreed immediately, almost too quickly. The first red flag should have been how calm she was. During the break, Thomas was around a lot. He'd text me to grab drinks or come watch a game. Looking back, I realized he was fishing for information, asking how I was holding up, whether I thought Karen and I were really compatible long-term. I thought he was just being supportive. Then I noticed something small but off. One night, I came home earlier than expected. Thomas's car was parked outside my building. I texted him, joking about how he could have just told me he was in the area. He said he was visiting someone else in the building. There are only 6 units on our floor. I didn't confront anyone. I told myself I was being paranoid. We were technically on a break. I wanted to believe both of them respected me enough not to cross certain lines. I was wrong. I didn't find out the full truth that night. But that's when the pieces started shifting, and once I started paying attention, I saw more than I ever wanted to. The next few days I paid closer attention without saying anything. Karen and I were still texting casually during the break. Surface-level stuff. Memes. Updates about work. She kept emphasizing how healthy this space was for us. How mature we were being. It almost felt scripted. Thomas, meanwhile, kept inserting himself into my schedule. He wanted to grab drinks twice that week. He offered to help me move some furniture. He even suggested a weekend road trip to clear my head. In hindsight, it felt like he was managing me. 3 nights after I saw his car outside, it happened again. Same spot. Same time window. Around 10:30 p.m. This time I didn't text him. I just went upstairs quietly and waited in my unit with the lights off. My balcony has a partial angle of Karen's front door. Not intentionally, just how the building is designed. At 11:12 p.m., her door opened. Thomas walked out. He didn't look rushed. He didn't look guilty. He looked comfortable, like he'd been there before. I felt that weird cold drop in my stomach, but I still tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were just talking. Maybe she was venting to him about me. Still inappropriate, but not nuclear. I texted him 5 minutes later. "Hey man, what are you up to?" He replied almost instantly. "At home." Why? That was the moment something in me shifted. Not anger, just clarity. I didn't confront Karen that night either. I wanted more than suspicion. I wanted certainty. I'm not the type to accuse without proof. If I was going to blow up 2 relationships, I needed facts. The next afternoon, Karen asked if we could meet to talk about the break ending soon. Her tone was upbeat, almost smug. We met at a coffee shop 2 blocks away. She looked put together, confident, like someone who had already decided something. She told me she'd been doing a lot of thinking. And then she said something that, at the time, I didn't fully understand but would make perfect sense later. She said she realized she needed a partner who truly respected her independence. The way she emphasized independence felt pointed, deliberate. I asked her what that meant. She smiled and said we'd talk about it more that night. That night she came over to my place instead of asking me to come to hers. That alone felt calculated. She sat on my couch like nothing was wrong. Crossed legs, relaxed posture. She even complimented the new lamp I'd bought. It was surreal. I asked her directly if she had seen anyone during the break. She didn't answer immediately. She tilted her head slightly, like she was evaluating how honest she wanted to be. Then she said yes. Just yes. Calm. No apology attached. I asked who. She said Thomas. Not even hesitation. For a second, I genuinely thought she was testing me. I actually laughed because it felt absurd. My best friend. 3 years together. Same building. It sounded like lazy fiction. She didn't laugh. She said they hooked up twice. Both times during the break. She emphasized that detail like it was a legal defense. I asked if it started before the break. She said no. She said the break made her realize she had the freedom to explore connections she'd been curious about. Curious. I asked if Thomas knew the break had the condition of not seeing other people. She shrugged and said that was between me and her. Then she leaned back and delivered the line that's been replaying in my head ever since. We weren't together. I can do whatever I want. You don't own me. Real women don't ask permission to explore their options. There was no guilt in her voice. No conflict. Just defiance. I told her that basic respect isn't ownership. She rolled her eyes and said I was being insecure and territorial. That this was exactly why she needed space. That I was trying to control her choices. I asked if she planned to continue seeing him. She said she hadn't decided yet. She wanted to see who aligned with her better long-term. Like I was sitting in a job interview for my own relationship. What hit me hardest wasn't even the hookup. It was the fact that she spoke about it like it was some empowering milestone. Like betrayal was personal growth. I asked her one more thing. Does Thomas think you and I are done? She smiled slightly and said he knows we're figuring it out. That was the moment I understood something important. Thomas wasn't confused. He wasn't being misled. He knew exactly what he was doing. After Karen left my apartment that night, I didn't call her. I didn't yell. I didn't slam doors. I just sat there and replayed every interaction from the past month. The drinks Thomas insisted on. The way he asked if I thought Karen and I were compatible long-term. The sudden philosophical questions about commitment. It wasn't random. He was gathering intel. The next morning I texted him and asked if we could meet up. I kept it casual. Coffee near his office. When he showed up, he acted completely normal. Asked about work. Made jokes. Ordered like it was any other Tuesday. I asked him directly if he'd been seeing Karen. He froze for half a second. Just enough to confirm everything. Then he leaned back and said he didn't owe me a report on who he spends time with. I told him I already knew. He sighed, like I was inconveniencing him, and said we were on a break. That I couldn't expect people to put their lives on pause because I was figuring things out. He actually used that phrase. I asked him if he respected me. He said this wasn't about respect. It was about adults making choices. That word again. Choices. I pointed out that a best friend doesn't hook up with his friend's girlfriend during a 2-week pause. He shrugged and said if the relationship was solid, a break wouldn't threaten it. That's when I realized neither of them saw this as betrayal. They saw it as an opportunity. Karen framed it as empowerment. Thomas framed it as inevitability. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten him. I just paid the bill and left. But I made a decision walking back to my building. If they wanted to play technicalities and redefine loyalty, fine. I would operate strictly on facts too. And facts, unlike feelings, are very hard to argue with once they're public. I didn't rush into anything. That's important. For about a week, I acted normal. I responded to Karen politely, but with distance. I stopped initiating plans. I stopped checking in emotionally. If she wanted to explore options, she could do it without my validation. With Thomas, I kept things surface level. No confrontation. No drama. Just quiet observation. Here's what neither of them realized. Our friend group is tight. 8 of us. We've known each other for years. Group chats, weekend trips, birthdays. There are no secrets for long because we all overlap socially and professionally. Thomas works in finance. Reputation matters in his office. Karen works in marketing for a local wellness brand that leans heavily into empowerment messaging. Image is everything there. And both of them have been very vocal in the past about loyalty, about boundaries, about how they would never cross certain lines. So I started collecting timelines. Screenshots of messages during the break. The agreement about not seeing other people. The night his car was parked outside. The texts where he claimed he was at home. Her admission that she hadn't decided between us yet. I wasn't fabricating anything. I didn't need to. The facts were enough. I also did something simple but effective. I stopped protecting them socially. When one of our friends asked casually how the break was going, I answered honestly. I said Karen and Thomas hooked up during it and are currently exploring their connection. No emotion, just information. You would be surprised how fast information travels when it's delivered calmly. Within 2 days, I noticed shifts. Group chat quieter. Thomas suddenly unavailable for weekend plans. Karen posting vague quotes about growth and shedding insecure energy. She texted me asking if I had been talking about her. I replied that I wasn't talking about her. I was answering direct questions truthfully. She sent back a paragraph about privacy and maturity, about how airing personal business shows character. I told her actions show character too. That's when the tone changed. For the first time, she sounded nervous. The nervousness confirmed I was on the right track. Karen came over the next evening unannounced. That alone irritated me. We were technically on a break, yet she still felt entitled to access my space whenever she wanted. She didn't sit down this time. She stayed standing, arms crossed, defensive before I even spoke. She asked why people were suddenly treating her differently. Why Thomas mentioned that a couple of the guys seemed distant. I told her I hadn't said anything untrue. She said I was framing it to make her look bad. I asked her which part was inaccurate. The hookup, the timing, the fact that she was still deciding between us. She said context matters, that we were on a break, that mature adults understand nuance. I told her nuance doesn't change the timeline. That's when she escalated. She said I was punishing her for exercising autonomy, that this reaction proved she was right to question our compatibility. She repeated that real women don't ask permission to explore options. I told her exploring options is something you do when you are single, not when you are pausing a 3-year relationship with agreed boundaries. She snapped and said I made up those boundaries to control her. So I pulled out my phone and showed her the messages. The part where she agreed to 2 weeks with no seeing other people. Her words, not mine. She went quiet. Then she shifted tactics. She said even if she agreed in that moment, she is allowed to change her mind. That growth means evolving past old agreements. I asked her if that logic applied to Thomas too. If she would be fine with him sleeping with someone else while she was evaluating him. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she asked if I was trying to sabotage her career by talking. That was interesting. I hadn't mentioned her job once. That told me more than anything else. Because now it wasn't about empowerment or independence. It was about image control. And if image was what she cared about most, that's exactly where the pressure would build. I didn't need to do anything dramatic after that. The momentum was already building on its own. 2 days later, one of our mutual friends, Daniel, called me directly. Not text. Called. He asked if it was true that Thomas hooked up with Karen during the break. I said yes. I also clarified that Karen and I had agreed not to see other people during those 2 weeks. There was a long pause. Daniel told me Thomas had spent months criticizing another guy in our group for flirting with someone who wasn't fully single yet. He had called it low character. Said loyalty is revealed in gray areas. That irony spread fast. Meanwhile, Karen's office apparently got wind of it through a coworker who's dating one of the guys in our circle. I didn't contact anyone at her job. I didn't need to. Social networks do what they do. She works for a brand that constantly posts about integrity, emotional intelligence, and empowering women to make healthy relationship choices. Suddenly, people around her knew she slept with her long-term boyfriend's best friend during a 2-week break with clear boundaries. Again, no lies. Just sequence. Thomas texted me that night. He said I was being vindictive. I asked him what I had said that was false. He didn't answer that question either. Instead, he accused me of trying to isolate them socially because I couldn't handle rejection. Rejection. That word almost made me laugh. I told him I wasn't isolating anyone. I simply stopped covering for behavior that didn't align with how they publicly present themselves. Then I blocked him. Not out of anger. Out of efficiency. I don't argue in circles. Karen came by one last time. This time she was less confident. She said people were judging her unfairly. That private matters shouldn't become public narratives. That I knew how important her professional image was. I told her something simple. If you're proud of your choices, you shouldn't be afraid of people knowing about them. She didn't have a response for that. And for the first time since this started, she looked unsure. What really shifted everything wasn't yelling or dramatic confrontations. It was social gravity. Thomas stopped showing up to group events entirely. At first, he claimed he was busy with work. Then he just stopped responding in the chat. One of the guys told me privately that Thomas had tried to frame the situation differently. He said Karen and I were basically over before the break. That I was emotionally checked out. The problem for him was simple. People had seen us together 2 weeks before the break. They were at my birthday. They heard Karen talking about future travel plans with me. The timeline didn't support his rewrite. Karen, meanwhile, pivoted hard online. More posts about boundaries. More vague captions about men who feel threatened by independent women. It felt like she was trying to out-message the narrative instead of addressing it. But in real life, tone matters more than captions. At a small get-together I still attended, someone asked me directly if I'd consider getting back together with her. I said no. Not aggressively. Not bitterly. Just no. I explained that once trust shifts into technical loopholes, there's no rebuilding it. You either share values around loyalty or you don't. It's not something you negotiate retroactively. That conversation circulated too. A few days later, I heard through another friend that Karen and Thomas had tried officially dating for about a week. It didn't last. Apparently, once they were actually accountable to each other, the dynamic changed. Karen questioned who else he might be curious about. Thomas didn't like being second choice publicly. Funny how autonomy feels different when you're the one waiting to be chosen. Karen texted me late one night asking if we could reset. She said the pressure from everyone was overwhelming, that we made a mistake letting outsiders influence us. I told her no one influenced my decision. She did. And that was the first message I didn't feel any emotion sending. Just closure beginning to settle in. After I told her no, things quieted down in a way that almost felt anticlimactic. Karen stopped coming by. No more long paragraphs about empowerment. No more attempts to reframe what happened. She sent one final message saying she hoped I would eventually mature enough to understand her perspective. I didn't respond. Thomas tried one last indirect move. He reached out through Daniel, asking if I would be open to sitting down as men and clearing the air. That phrase alone told me he still thought this was about miscommunication. It wasn't. There's nothing to clarify when someone knowingly crosses a boundary and then defends it. Around that time, word reached me that Thomas's reputation at work had taken a small but noticeable hit. Finance offices thrive on perception. One of our friends works in the same building and mentioned that the story had circulated. Nothing official, just quiet commentary about judgment and character. Karen's situation was more subtle, but just as real. A coworker apparently challenged her during a meeting about brand messaging on relationship integrity. It wasn't a direct accusation, but it was pointed enough that she knew people were aware. Again, I didn't orchestrate any of that. I didn't send emails. I didn't tag anyone online. I didn't post screenshots publicly. I simply stopped protecting them and answered questions honestly when asked. The consequences came from the contrast between their words and their actions. What surprised me most was how calm I felt through all of it. I wasn't raging. I wasn't plotting revenge in some dramatic way. I just refused to absorb blame for something I didn't do. Karen tried to frame it as me being possessive. Thomas framed it as me being insecure. But neither of them could argue with the actual timeline. 2 weeks. Clear agreement. Secret hookup. Immediate justification. Once I reduced it to that, there wasn't much left to debate. And without debate, there wasn't much left of them either. It's been about 2 months now. Karen and I don't speak. We still technically live on the same floor, but our schedules rarely overlap. The one time we passed each other in the hallway, she looked through me like I was a stranger. No hostility, just avoidance. Thomas moved out of his place last week. Not officially because of this, but the timing says enough. I heard he's renting somewhere across town now. Our group hasn't cut him off entirely, but he's no longer central. Invitations are selective. Trust doesn't regenerate just because time passes. As for Karen and Thomas together, that ended quietly. From what I understand, once the initial rush of defiance wore off, they realized they didn't actually like what they saw in each other. When the relationship started under technicalities and loopholes, every interaction carried suspicion. I've thought a lot about her words. We weren't together. I can do whatever I want. You don't own me. Real women don't ask permission to explore their options. She was right about one thing. I don't own her. But I also don't owe her access to my loyalty once she redefined the terms without mutual agreement. That's the part she never seemed to anticipate. She expected me to either accept it quietly or explode and look unstable. What she didn't expect was neutrality. Facts delivered calmly. Boundaries enforced without theatrics. I didn't destroy their lives. That narrative would be dramatic and inaccurate. I just removed myself and stopped shielding them from the natural consequences of their choices. If anything fell apart, it wasn't because I exposed secrets. It was because the story they told about themselves couldn't survive basic transparency. And if I learned anything from this, it's simple. When someone hides behind technicalities to justify crossing a line, the relationship is already over. The only real decision left is whether you walk away loudly or quietly. I chose quietly, and somehow, that made the loudest impact of all.